Hello, everyone. This is 365 days towards racial change. Excuse me. And my name is Tomlins Nyback. We're here talking about Black in America and some of the challenges, pitfalls, some necessary elements that would be a good idea for the Black community to adopt, recognizing resistance um, from whites and other ethnic sectors in the land, and I don't know how to break out of any complacency on all parties to think that complacency in the sense of thinking that racism, resistance to a person because of their skin color does not exist in the land. I've just have too many personal experiences where I take out all the elements of my challenge, and it comes down to my skin color. And plenty of portions of American society would say, well, we're not racist, we're not burning crosses, we're not lynching, we're not shooting up churches and whatnot. But I would say, have you assisted, have you facilitated um, Black success as much as Blacks have helped, probably helped your group? We built the nation, we built the Capitol, I was reminded of. Um, and when I say built the capital of the United States, Washington D.C., uh, we did a talk months ago about a Black architect um, that stood in either when the white supervisor or somebody couldn't finish the job, there was a Black mind that completed a lot of tasks. So yeah, you're not uh, throwing bricks through my window, pulling me down the road behind a car on a chain, right? Although I think the desire still exists in the land, but it's the subtle way, right? It's when when I get resistance to upward mobility and work, when I'm prevented access to power. Oh, but they want me to do the same job. That's a big tip off for racism, right? And discrimination, it's going to have a different name. If I was a white female getting passed over, then it's sexism. Either way, it's somehow some group or organization is preventing me from access to wealth and power, but they want me to do the same job. And in my case, the one job that I just lost a little while ago, not only was I doing the same job, but I was doing a skilled position and not being compensated for it. I don't have time to fight and go to court and rail against, right? Because then I look like the singular Black man who's playing the race card to get what he wants. Right? That's the spin all the power groups will put on it. Enough of that. But that's why we're here, so we can recognize some of the subtle ways of resistance, so we can recognize if we are black, then we can recognize some ways to change, help the community, adjust our behavior to secure some better position for the younger folks coming up behind us. Either way, I could make 365 of these videos, and it would the arguments and studies would never be complete because we've got 400 or 500 years of history to dissect and whatnot. We could boil it down to maybe a few components, but you really got to talk about these things. And there's agreement and disagreement on all sides. We are heaped up with the headlines where racism isn't even, it's not a news cycle as it was in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, thereabouts, It is, we're right now, today's date is Martin Luther King Jr.'s celebration observation. So it's getting its news cycle. By the end of the week, we'll have moved on to the Middle East, oil, impeachment, you know. All that. No, let's talk. I want to give a shout out to the royal family on the earth. I'm going to do my best not to rail against the royal family because a lot of why we're here stems, from colonial times, from royalty and all this stuff in England, right? And wars and ownership and colonization, um, dominating people and coming with your guns and your force and all that. And it really it'd be interesting to see what the world would be like had not there been this English influence all slathered all over the place. But I want to give a shout out. This is something that happens. It's not uncommon where you have, occasionally you'll get some people of the royal family with a different character. I won't say better. I'm not going to judge the queens and kings and princes and all that. I don't know them personally, but when you see one of their members uh, with the desire to come out of the royal circle, so to speak, and so our recent defectors is Harry and Meghan. I just want to give them a shout out because that's got to take some. It's got to take some courage. They're leaving off of some resources. They've got a name that's going to carry them along, and I'm sure there are some other avenues. They ain't going to be out on the street. Maybe their lifestyle may alter a little bit, but it's still a big step to come out, and they're exhibiting, some behavior that I wish we'd see more consistently. People willing to risk, you know, separate off from the status quo, from the expectation, and make your own path. Right? This is an ancient, old path of pomp and circumstance and royalty and all that, and that would make me sick after a while. And I'm looking for opportunities for privilege. Yeah, so you go Harry and Meghan, and if you look at if you Google, you'll find other potentates and duchesses and princes who've come out of the royal family circle and became civilians, so to speak. We like that. I like seeing that. Uh, I'm very I know I'm very critical and biased about power, privilege, and things like that. It's whiteness and whatnot, but there's those outliers in every discipline, every social circle. Black folks, how you doing? I'm finally getting to my budget, uh, and actually I go to my normal plantation working evenings. I'm starting school, so my holiday pay is over, so I got to see what's happening. Anyway, got to look at my budget and see where I'm at financially. In a few months, I'm moving and all that, you know. And that's the other thing. We are here. I mean, ultimately, my personal goal, my goal for everybody is that we would move in the American socioeconomic structure freely, which we don't, you know. And uh, and it happens are if we have the right financial position that to sustain that. And it's tough to do. I just saw an article on my feed about um, runners in on their canal. Like we got these privileged folks that can run and ride bikes. I used to do that a lot. I want to do that again. But in California, they said there's a mile-long camp on each side of these trails, and it's like because landowners are gouging people and make it impossible to live inside a space. Right. See, that's the sad thing. America, when I was conditioned in public schools, I was conditioned to believe this land was about equality and had resolved its issues with power and that there would always be resources and all this stuff. But, you got landowners, they can just charge you. There's no outreach at all. You know, you've got to be super wealthy. And what they want the tenants to pay their rent. It's a new kind of slavery going on out there. And these runners in their privilege who can run, up and down trails are complaining about the homeless. Um, I'm not an advocate of that when the wealthy are just doing everything they can to increase their wealth and their pocketbooks and not help their neighbors. Where's citizenry and loyalty to the nation and all that, right? Homeless veterans. What a sad state of affairs. Sad state. My mind was awakened, and I'm inspired to do this work by a man named Dr. Claud Anderson. He's written a bunch of great works. I've read three, and his works will be informing our discussions as the year goes out. A Black History reader, 101 questions you never thought to ask. His name's Dr. Claud Anderson. Black labor, white wealth, search for power and economic justice, and PowerNomics. You can find Dr. Anderson here on YouTube and at PowerNomics.com. He's easy to find, Dr. Claud Anderson. Behind me, you see the hashtag #US2 symbol. You'll find black women supporting one another, having their sharing resources. Check out Blag Enough, BLAGGENUF, more uh, another platform to get you express yourself, find resources. And if you got a business mind, check out Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School, theblackbusinessschool.com. We finished our series in Uncle Tom's Cabin, but I want to keep jamming this down your throat. It's a must read, and other books. I'm going through a book called Drapetomania. Pretty dense, pretty intense reading. You know, just when you think you've gotten to understand white man's privilege and absolute power during slavery, out comes some other aspects of privileged life for white folks and disadvantaged life for black folks that rattle your whole foundation. All right, today we're in PowerNomics, page 223. In the last few minutes we got here, it's Dr. Anderson's word to the church is very important. In PowerNomics, he tries not to leave any stone unturned about concerning approaches to an empowered Black America. Um, we he aimed very high, and we did not get. We're not there because we're struggling. Black Americans don't understand the how destructive integration was for the Black community. Integration is for the Black community. The only we're not going to realize Dr. Anderson's dream until we wake up from Dr. King's dream. I'll try to leave it at that. In our next time, I'm going to start something on integration. But today is the churches. Dr. Anderson appears to be pretty spiritual. You know, he says in regards to wealth and power, God is our advocate. And the thing about the spiritual life, the path with God and all that, it's always opposite, right? Well, it's our experience on earth. If it's negative and destructive, we look forward to an afterlife of lights and gold and life everlasting with God and stuff like that. And so that was kind of a tool in the hands of white power during slavery. As we saw in Uncle Tom's Cabin, though, it could backfire a little bit if the slave really took those uh, religious, spiritual maxims to heart. Then the 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 slave is in possession of some free will at that point, especially if the slave owner starts scratching at the slave's relationship with God. Then there's some issues because if the slave is like, you know, you can beat me and put me in the field and talk about labor and all this stuff and family, but when you start mess with my God, then that's mine, and that's the line in the sand. You can't cross it. So, in regards to wealth and power and all that, you know, there's the idea where life is tough here now, but when we cross over, things will be good again. Uh, and Dr. Anderson, I guess he reflects. He's got some biblical knowledge, and he sees how wealth and power inequalities generally are righted in a biblical sense in this life. But there are many who pass on without having enjoyed access and fruits of their labor and whatnot. and whatnot. My experience in the black church, my pedagogy is very weak. We and it was a combination of weakness at church, weakness at home, and actually in my teens, in my rebellious years, church just went off. It just was superfluous. A lot of things going on in my personal life and all that. And well, I say that to say the church needs to be that place, a source. It's the most um, recognized civilized place where black people congregate and have some order and growth and things like that. And a lot of churches, I'm sure, do well with, doing their best to forward some life skills, education, social understanding issues, and things like that. My church was just terribly weak. And I don't know what the church I grew up with, I don't have no idea what they're doing. And I'm not a churchgoer anyway. I have a different relationship with God now. But it's the church should be that place. You think of it, that would be the place of spiritual work, growth, uh, uh, evangelism, outreach, understanding God, things like that. It was just absent in my early formative years. Uh, and we have to be careful. Uh, we don't want the black church just to be the continuation of white control and stuff like that. Back in slavery times, oh, there'd be a white observer in the church, and the slaves had to preach a certain message. So they were very restricted and confined in what they could expound upon in the Bible, how it was delivered. They couldn't necessarily encourage free will, freedom, and things like that. No, you more of the slavery, the bondage of the Israelites, and being um, at a disadvantage, and how to be humble in that experience was what this teachings, those are the lines of teaching, that kind of conditioning in during slavery. But it's interesting. You've heard me talk negatively about how much of Africa is left in um, Black Americans. I don't like the term. I heard the term. I was at a I was at a marade for Martin Luther King's parade. I'd have no. I don't. I missed when they changed the term. That's how far removed I am. But they used African American a lot. I don't like that. I'm not an African American. There's no Africa in me. I've got some physical features and whatnot. So you'll hear me talk negatively about that. But two things I realize, I have to back up a little bit. Two things that have survived in us from Africa is creativity and spirituality, right? Very hearty, robust people in those two areas. So, the white church, had its influence, but the beauty is wisdom, pure and right truth can always penetrate a situation, right? Even if I'm getting false teaching, propaganda, and whatnot, the essence of um, of the topic, of the subject, is always going to break through. And so um, the teachings were tainted and appropriated, claimed by white power, but it couldn't suppress uh, the purity and the truth of what needed to be conveyed and made and offered to everyone. So that's a good thing. And so that spirituality, creativity, coming together with these Protestant, essentially Protestant teachings. We got Catholics too. I don't want to go down that road of all the branches we got. Um, but I think there's a singular truth there for the Christian. We found in Harriet Beecher Stowe's work, how white people, and especially in Uncle Tom's day, were like, you black folks, you're going through this now, but in the great by and by, everything will be all right. You'll still be with us. White folks, they get the privilege now, and they stay privileged in in heaven. It's not a role reversal at all. For the blacks, it's a role reversal. For the whites, it's just the status quo. It's always uh, the standard that they are privileged and in charge. I just want to put that out there so we could debunk that. I don't know what it's going to look like in heaven, but my understanding idea of God's not going to let that slide. You guys are murderous, rapistic, brutal. You don't get some kind of reward for being that way. That's insane. Um, so the church, it's the black church is the place to bring wealth, power, prosperity. The blacks. I've seen that in some black churches. I've experienced that and seen that happen. Um, Anthropologists tend to agree that Africa is the where humanity began. Humanity, which has come out of Africa. A lot of maps and studies that I've seen, and it is Dr. Anderson. He's trying to tell us God's on the side of black people for wealth and power and things like that. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of positive propaganda out of Africa. I'm always bombarded with Somalia, struggles in South Africa, and things like that. But Africa has cities and organizations and black billionaires and things like that. Um, they're civilized folks. I just get the propaganda, um, but even then, Africa and like other places have their pockets of oppression, disadvantaged groups, war, violence, disease, and so with God and the church, I mean, there's an element where you look at the status quo right now, and you say, man, there's got to be some rest or something better when we shake off this mortal coil. Um, so the church could be more vocal. Unfortunately, the black church carries the integration banner, and that's a big hurdle. This integration idea, right? I understand the argument, and I totally am on Dr. Anderson's bandwagon about the failure of integration, how blacks left so much on the table, and maybe for the time, I think when the blacks saw white oppression ease up, through integration, I could see that, that relief is like, oh, okay, yeah, let me get my bearings. It just didn't go far enough. We should not have integrated. We should have maintained, established our space, and grew from there. But instead we submitted once again to strong white influence, waiting for white power to hand out, and we lost a lot of momentum and potency through integration. Um, so the Black church, it's got potential. It's still one of the primary places where blacks will congregate. Something I'm going to add as we finish up today is the Black church needs to hold the recipients accountable, and we need to be engaging in effective pedagogy. We need to, our teaching, what we're passing on, uh, uh, needs to, we got to start getting some old money, running businesses, and a lot of things. Get out of blacks being the consumers in America and be more leaders, business owners, right? I think we're seeing some more entrepreneurship, but I'd like to see it more on the center stage, more on in prime time, so to speak, well, without a compromise to white power. I'm Thomas Nyback. It's day 307, 365 days towards racial change. I will see you again. Bye-bye.